Hey class, it's me, Amanda, and I'm here to assist you in the supporting materials information that we were going to go over in class. So I will start out by talking to you about examples, and that will be this portion of the lecture. Example, statistics, and testimony are the three different types of supporting materials that you can use outside of your own words, outside of your own understanding. You are going to be coming across a huge amount of information and material, and the way that we start to synthesize and express those ideas is typically in our own voice. So your sub points, so you'll have a main point, and then you're going to have a couple different topics under that main point. Whatever those topics are, those will more than likely be written in your voice, in the way that you express it. But those subpoints will need some kind of support. And if it calls for information that is beyond the scope of us simply believing you know that information, or that it demands for an explanation, or we need more detail, you can always look to sources outside of yourself and from experts and incorporate that into your writing and into your speech. So the first type of supporting material that we'll look at is something called an example. And by definition, an example is simply a specific case used to illustrate a point or to represent a group of people, ideas, conditions, experiences, or the like. You know what an example is because you use them all the time, usually when we say the words, for example. When do we use the words, for example? Well, when the information that we're talking about is not general knowledge that everybody has. If we need to explain something or make clear to our audience, an example is a great way to begin to do that. So like it says, represent a group of people, ideas, conditions, experiences, or the like. With exception of maybe one of you in this class, all of you are speaking about experiences, people, concepts, laws that are not in your own wheelhouse. Meaning, for example, but meaning that you will have to find an example to explain the hardship of Black youth being criminalized. Those examples aren't going to come from your own frame of reference or your own mind. So we will find an example to illustrate or to paint a picture for our audience about what their experience looked like, or perchance the conditions of which they will exist or live in the world. I'm going to paint that picture through these examples. So the first type of example that we will go over is this brief example. In the definition of a brief example, a specific case referred to in passing to illustrate a point. So does that mean as I'm walking by? No, it does not. But it means that we don't spend as much time on it. A brief example is one that is needed when your idea or your point or your claim is easy, your audience more than likely understands it, but you want to give an example just in case. It's nothing that needs a huge extension. It's nothing that needs a lot of definitions. It is an example that's used when your audience may already know about the material, may already have a good sense of knowledge about it, but in this case, you'll give a brief example just to make sure that we're all on the same page. That's what these examples do as well. It's like you think that we're talking about one thing, for example, like the conditions, like living on the streets. It's like, no, what does living on the streets look like? Let me give you an example of what that looks like. So we need to go on with that. Oh, wow. All right. So with this brief example, a specific case used in passing to illustrate a point. So let's say I make the claim. One of my parts is, advancements in technology have made what once seemed impossible possible. Advancements in technology have made what once seemed impossible possible. When I read this sentence, am I saying what? How? In what way? Probably not. Because when I say advancements in technology have made what once seemed impossible possible, what do I know about my audience? My entire audience is a generation full of technology. It's not like they've never seen technology develop. Something happens literally every 6 months in Apple that makes technology boom and it does something that we've never even heard of before. It's like, what? I didn't even know I could do that. Now I can write on my cell phone and do all these things, right? So in order to make sure that everybody gets what you're talking about, you can give a brief example, but it doesn't need any more detail. Why? Because your audience more than likely understands what you're talking about from the experiences that we have. We know their generation, we know their age, we know that they've been living, right? So if I wanted to say that, advancements in technology have made what once seemed impossible possible. For example, with the development of a smartphone, you can now receive all of your email instantaneously on a small device rather than having or a small device anywhere rather than having to be connected to a desktop as it was for so many years. So there's your brief example. Your audience doesn't need a lot of detail. They already know. So it's like technology has made what once seemed impossible possible. For example, once you used to have to have all of your music on CDs, cassettes, or even a record player. It would require not only the music itself, but also the device. Now, I have that entire library right with the touch of a button. So something easy, and it doesn't even need to be that long and descriptive. That's a brief example. Your audience knows what the material is. They know what you're talking about. They have a lot of information on it, or they've just been living in the world, so it's obvious and it's common knowledge. You can throw a brief example simply to make sure you're on the same point. Now, the extended example comes in when your audience does not know about your topic, when they need more detail and information, when they've never heard about a story before, when they've never heard about a topic, or when it's complex. For example, twins separated at birth but reunited 30 years later found out that they had more in common than one may think. Now, my audience, if I just went on and was like, now I'll tell you about what those twins are doing, I think that some of the questions in the audience's mind may be, what do they have in common? What do you mean? And that's where we could give an extended example. So a story or a narrative or an anecdote. That's what an extended example is. And it's demonstrated or illustrated at some length in order to illustrate a point. Now, as a reminder from the works cited or citing and quoting and paraphrasing, extended examples should not be directly quoted. In this case, extended examples are always going to be better being summarized. Why? Because if I spend 5 sentences reading a quotation, it's going to become boring with the potential of losing all type of delivery elements that we're looking for. So your job is to bring about that kind of excitement and enthusiasm in these extended examples. So I'll tell you a little bit about that in a bit, but let's go back to the twins. Twins separated at birth, but reunited 30 years later have more in common than anyone would have thought. And so in my mind, I'm like, what? I should probably give some examples. For example, Tommy and Jimmy were twins who were separated at birth, reunited 30 years later on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and to everybody's surprise, had 15 like experiences that cannot be attributed to anything in nature. I don't remember the names that I use. I'm now going to call them Timmy and Tommy. Timmy and Tommy both got the chicken pox at 15. Timmy and Tommy both married women named Sally, got divorced a year later, and remarried women named Mary on the same day. I made all this up, but this would be the type of example. So then we could go through those specific things that they had. I wouldn't probably go through all 15. That would be crazy town, but I could give some detail or an extended example to illustrate what I was speaking about. The last thing is a hypothetical example. If you haven't seen the movie An Inconvenient Truth, or other one, no, I guess An Inconvenient Truth would be a good one, a good example. If you haven't seen that or heard of it, you could even do a light search, but Al Gore, our former vice president, did a documentary about global warming and the reality of it. But the entire documentary was essentially, or the last part of it, was essentially a hypothetical example. So what's this hypothetical example and why would we use it? Well, it describes an imaginary or a fictitious situation. We need this type of example when we don't have an experience that has happened, and I now need to create that experience for you to understand. So in the case of Al Gore, he created an entire hypothetical situation about what the world is going to look like if we don't start taking action on protecting our planet now. So he talked about what the earth would look like and what the resources would look like. And he talked about, and he showed visual aids and any type of illustration also helps with this. I don't know if you've ever seen those before and after pictures of like what what California will look like in the event of a tidal wave. That is a hypothetical illustration or an example to put it into the minds of the audience so that we start to see the potential of what could happen or what could happen. The other is a fictitious situation. So so these hypothetical examples don't have to be in regards to things that are absolutely true. It could be things that have happened in the future, or a fictitious situation that we want to get in the heads of our audience and maybe even put them in the experience that we're talking about. People often will do this in their introduction. Picture it. You're 16, you're sitting at home. So let me do one, for example. It's dark. It's late. It's not until the library door closes behind you and the lights go out that you realize you are all alone. Quickly, you start walking to your dorm. You look behind you because you hear the rustling of leaves and the wind rushing past your face. You start to now pick up a faster speed, running as fast as you can, considering, is there somebody behind me? Only when you close the door to your room, take a deep sigh of relief. Do you feel safe? But are you? This may be an opportunity for you to take self-defense classes. So have any of you been in this situation? Have you literally been at the library with the door closing behind you in the wind and thinking, no, but many of us have been in a situation where we have felt that kind of fear, like somebody's following us, like, oh crap, I shouldn't have walked this way, I shouldn't have done A, B, and C. That's a type of hypothetical example that we can get you into. So we can put you into the place of somebody, or we can put you into the experience of somebody by creating a picture this, imagine this. Consider this scenario that may come from the future. That's how we would do the hypothetical example. So here are some tips for using your examples. Ready? 1, use examples to clarify your idea. What does clarify? It means to make clear in the eyes of the audience and in the mind. So draw the picture for them. Let them see exactly what you're talking about. The example is there to help your claim come clear to everybody, right? Advancements in technology, what once seemed impossible, possible. Meh. For example, ooh, and now it's lit up, and oh, and now I get it. That did clarify. Thank you for helping me understand exactly what you were talking about. So we can see it in our eye. It makes it clear we're all on the same page. We know exactly what you were talking about. Use examples to reinforce your idea. That's the one in the brief example. Just when you think, oh, my audience already knows about that, maybe throw in a brief example for good measure. If you don't end up using it in the interest of time, you throw it out. If you think your audience knows, but they all give you the face, then maybe throw in the brief example. But at least it reinforces the idea of what you're speaking about, because we can make a point, or we can give a definition, or we can make an assertion. But when we have that example, it really helps. And the last thing, use examples to personalize your ideas. Y'all, and many of us may not have had the own experiences, but I think that what was so important, for example, about Yusuf's speech is that when he gave his last one, is that he started to talk about his own experience or his friend's experience. I guess that would maybe instead be an extended example because it's in one. No, instead it would be then the example from Yusuf's first speech when he talked about his suite mate asking him if he was part of the something. So when we use our own experiences, or when we say like, for example, when I was there, for example, when I went to this experience, for example, when I talked to so-and-so, or when I was at the convention, you can always use that, and it personalizes your idea. It makes you a normal human being that's accessible. It shows your connection to the material, and it also builds your credibility a bit. So feel free to use those. It has now been 15 minutes, and I'm going to sign off for examples, and I'll get you back on statistics soon. One more. I lied. Tips for using examples, just kidding. Okay, make sure your examples are vivid and richly textured. What does this mean? Well, much like I was doing with the example in front of the library, I did rustling leaves and whooshing wind and slamming doors. All of this brought your examples to life. And the last thing is practice your delivery to enhance your extended examples. Your voice and your face are very important, but the other thing is that, like I said, if you are going to give those long chunks of information that are not from yourself, summarizing is incredibly important because it will allow you to speak in an extemporaneous manner rather than reading a quotation. If you're going to read a quotation and it's extended, you better practice exactly how that voice is going to sound. So make it exciting and interesting and engaging.